Dan, you remember when we talked not too long ago about where is the winter time? It is so warm and nice outside.
I do vaguely remember that. And
Yeah.
where is it? Well, let me tell you, it's here.
Yeah. I like to refer to those days as the good old days
Yes.
because, yeah, they are gone, man. It is winter time outside today. Woo.
And these first few days where you get those, we're up here in Wisconsin. We were in the single digits. Those first few days you hit that mark, it feels extra cold. I don't know what it is. It really hits
I
hard.
always found that interesting too because cold and absence of heat is, it's a physical measurement. We're talking physics here. Water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. But I don't know, for Joe, 30 degrees in October feels a heck of a lot different than 30 degrees in February, you
Yeah.
know?
Yep.
Oh,
Totally
wow.
agree.
It is awful outside. I couldn't even breathe on the way out to my furnace. The wind, I go out early in the morning just to make sure it's in good shape for the day. Oh, wow. That
Yep.
hurt. Yeah.
When I go out, I have my boots in the garage, and I don't have any socks on, so I just throw my feet in the boots, and like now when it's this cold, holy moly, is that it's just wakes you right up, and it's freaking cold, man.
Yes. Fortunately for me, I have a desk job and I just rarely go outside in bad weather. So I am in good shape for the season.
Well, it doesn't even
But
get really cold down there in Ohio.
yeah, I talking with you when we're always comparing our notes, it's definitely colder for you um, on average. But we also live downwind from Lake Erie, so we have some serious snow events that happen. But like last year, we didn't get any snow. It was great. I was hoping to continue that trend this year, but we're not off to a good start.
Well, maybe you'll finally get to use that snowblower.
Yeah, that was isn't that funny? Like you you wash your car and it rains, and then where we live out here in the country, our power goes out all the time. One little windstorm and our power's out for 2 days. So I turned my one hobby of solar power. I've constructed this off-grid solar system.
Ooh.
I've had it up and running now for about a year and a half. Power hasn't gone out ever since. Yep.
Oh, yeah. Murphy.
We'll run
Murphy's
Yeah, I
around.
run our refrigerator off our backup solar system just because I'm bored, because power never goes out anymore. So Dan, there was some interesting videos recently on YouTube about firewood, and I thought maybe we could have a discussion about some of these. And it revolves around, I don't know, not just what firewood is worth, how much you can sell it for, or what's it worth to you if you want to use it at your house, but what is firewood in and of itself? And I know that sounds confusing, but I mean, when I look at a stick of firewood, to me, it's not just the stick of firewood, but it's also the service around it. For a customer to have a stick of firewood, assuming that they didn't make it themselves, is what they just purchased just the wood? And I don't think it is. I think that there is a lot of other things that go into the worth
The
of a
value.
stick. Yeah, of a
Yep.
stick or a cord or a half a cord or a face cord of firewood. It's not just the wood. Am I
Right.
making sense?
I'm hearing you. I agree. There's more to it than, yes, just the stick of wood.
Well, had it's I'm going to when I say it's an incident, it makes it sound like it was negative, but it wasn't. Really nothing ever happened, but it just got my rusty wheels churning. When I was delivering wood to a customer, his neighbor came over, and this customer, to me, it's out of area. He had some very specific requests on species. He wanted it split down, and I would do it because I have a good relationship with him. He made it worth my while. But when I was delivering it to his house, his neighbor comes over and he's all excited and he wanted to buy firewood. And he asked the guy what he paid for it. And he told him, and the guy stood there with his jaw fell open. And I was wondering what was going on inside this guy's head, the neighbor. Was he thinking I'm ripping this guy off? you know? And I wasn't. It was a mutually agreed upon number. It was worth both of our while. He knew exactly what he was getting. But to that guy, the neighbor who comes over, I think he just saw firewood.
Right. Just sticks of wood.
Split sticks of dead trees.
Yep. And it's just so easy to get that stuff.
Yeah. And well, not for me, it isn't. I mean, sometimes for me to get a phone call returned here with all my volume and stuff, I think, Jupiter has to align with Venus. It's got to be a clear day on a Tuesday in Brazil, and I'll get to you. But this guy here, I know he was just looking at the wood and looking at me and looking at the guy, like the needle drug across the record. There was like crickets chirping, and his brain's trying to process, where in the heck am I coming up with this dollar amount for these sticks of wood laying here on the ground in front of him?
Yeah. And that's, I think, it gets to the whole what people look at and perceive. Even people who sell, a lot of times they just think of it as, this is something that everyone is always trying to get the best deal on. So if I'm selling wood for a certain price and I see somebody else selling it for less, I think to myself, oh, I better go down to that level in order to compete, instead of looking to see who's selling it at the highest price and then aspiring my operation to get to that point. Like, I think does that make sense? Like, the mentality is always geared towards going down to the lowest value.
I think so, but I think it is also related to what the people think is creating this value. And I think they just look at the wood, and that's it. And that's where I call firewood a commodity. And a commodity is a good, a product that anyone can make, and it doesn't matter who grew the produce or who drilled the oil out of the ground or who made the firewood. That's what it is, and that's, it has a universal price to it. Like a barrel of oil, you look at the markets and they'll tell you what a barrel of oil is worth. But for like a person like you and me, we stare at that barrel of oil, or the quart of oil at the Walmart, and we see the oil, but we don't see all of the refining, the production, the marketing that got it to where it is right there. And I think with firewood, because there isn't a lot of times there's not that pretty packaging. There's not, it's just a bulk delivery dumped onto someone's driveway. And that's where I think firewood gets a bad rap. And we think that it is just sticks of wood dumped on the ground, and we leave it at that. And that's where I think a lot of times we're missing the true value of firewood, because we're not paying attention to or calculating the worth, the value of who is the delivery service.
Right. And that's a big factor right there, because when you've got the most famous delivery service in the world coming to you in Ohio, yeah, that's playing into it. You don't just have some, firewood farmer out in the middle of nowhere. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I think, there's a lot more that goes into firewood. And when you do think about the service provided, how do you look past the fact that, you can't just judge the wood? I don't know if that's making sense or not, but for the average person, if you just see a load of firewood, how do you get them? How do you talk to your customers to get them to realize the service involved, or do you not?
And I think that the big battlefield for this whole situation is revolves around like bundled firewood. Because man, you'll see this a lot on, we talked about the Facebook user groups, or whenever I put up a video on bundled firewood, a lot of people will say that's a ripoff. You can buy an entire cord for $150, and you're charging $10 for a 1 cubic foot. You're right around $1,000 a cord what you're paying for that firewood, and that's a ripoff. But that is where I think that is where you are missing the true value of what the firewood is. And that's where I've always said smaller splits makes the firewood worth more, and certainly packaging it up. And then, looking at the customer too. I needed to buy a 50-pound bag of sand to level this concrete slab I got out here. It was sinking in. And why wasn't someone saying, well, that's a ripoff buying that bag of sand because you can get an entire dump truck load for just a few dollars more, but I
Right.
don't need I don't need a big dump truck load of sand. I just need a couple shovelful.
Or you could just go out and dig a hole and find it yourself.
Not where I live. I'll find clay and water when I dig.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't understand the whole rip-off game or why people. But most of the people complaining that it's a rip-off are those that also sell it, and that's where I get back to that whole. Everyone is in a race to the bottom. It
Yeah.
seems.
Well, that was a conscious effort when I was, when I'm talking about, I did my study on if my business model could be profitable. I wasn't wearing a lab coat and I didn't have any microscopes out, and some computer simulations. I was just thinking, well, what in the heck do I need to do to not lose the house here? And how much wood do I need to sell? And what I had figured out was I needed to avoid that race to the bottom. And instead of lowering my prices to get sales, I found if you raise your prices, you get sales.
Oh, yeah, and that makes the sales even better.
Well, there are two ways to make money in firewood: volume and margin. And for some people that being a volume producer, that's the way you do it. You got the machinery to do it, you got the labor power to do it, you got the network of customers to do it, then go for it, man. um, I, on the other hand, can't do that because it's just me. I didn't have the space, I don't have the network, I don't have the supply, I don't have the machines. So I went for margin. So I go after customers who are willing to pay a lot more for their firewood than other customers, you know? And
Yeah.
it's and you see that in what I call value added firewood, but that also includes bundles. And you got people who are wanting the cheap firewood that are offended by what people are paying for a small quantity delivered, or they're just buying a couple bundles. But I think what's missing from this, Dan, is that the people who buy the bundles and who buys the value added firewood, they can be just as annoyed from the commodity group because, and I hear it all the time from customers. The guy just dumped a load of mud and mulch and wood in his driveway and left, and that's not what they want.
Right. Yep.
So, yeah,
Yeah. But so back just quick to the whole volume versus,
margin.
the margins. Yes. I think the other thing that's confusing there is that a lot of times the people who are claiming everything's a ripoff is they don't see how you can do the margin side of it with, in the same process of the way you do volume. So like, for instance, you have to put in a little more time to get out your value added firewood, correct?
I agree.
Yeah. So in doing that, that's where I don't think they see that, you always hear this: time is money, time is money. You're spending too much time,
Right.
it's costing you money. Every time you touch the firewood, it costs you money. But
Ugh.
doesn't that time that you put in get more value and money out on the end?
Yeah, totally agree. And that's where I think people that just see firewood as a commodity, they see it as a volume sale. To them, that is a waste of time because that could have been another load going down the road being dumped in someone's driveway versus stacking it, or splitting it down, making
Yes.
it smaller.
Yep.
So that's where I have found doing that type of extra work is profitable for me, and that's how I make my living. I, yes, I could make my life so much easier. Well, you know what? I would argue I wouldn't because I'd have to work even more. I'd have to put more labor in, and I'd have to like move a lot more wood, and that ain't for me. I like small quantity, and I'll spend an extra day stacking and resplitting just to squeeze that much more money out of my wood.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
I hear all the time whenever I'm resplitting firewood, what a waste. What a waste of time that is. And
Yeah,
I completely disagree because I that's the size that I need to sell. Like that's what people want when they're buying bundles is they want the smaller split wood. So for me when I resplit, yeah, it's just a matter of putting in a little more time to get that money out on the other side. It's not time as money wasted, it's time and money gained in my opinion.
yeah. So I watched this one guy on YouTube. He mows yards, and he lives in Texas, and he stays in those housing developments where all the houses are real close together. And he makes like $500 before lunch just mowing grass. He has a pickup truck with a push mower and a weed whacker. And he makes $500 before lunch. And he just drives. And what he had done when he first got it started, he didn't have the network, he didn't have the reputation. So he would mow grass for cheap. And then the next year he would raise his prices, and the customers that he used to have, he would tell them that, he's raising his price, and then they would either pay it or go away. And then as he kept growing, he kept raising his prices, and he would just shed all of his earlier accounts because, they didn't want to pay his new rate.
Right.
And I kind of had that experience, and that's when I really knew I was onto something with firewood sales. When I first started doing this, I didn't know what I was doing, and I was delivering to a restaurant, and I gave them a price, and then it sounded like a lot of money at the time. But then, a year or two came, and you know what? I had to be honest with the guy, and I told him, I says, I think I'm not the right service for you. And I even had a guy in mind that I would recommend him to, because I said, I can't do this anymore at this price. And he says, well, how much more? And I go, well, in my head, I needed to charge an extra $200 more for what I was delivering him, which was almost, 50% increase.
Yeah.
And he says, okay, I'll still buy it, because I like you, I like what you do, and I don't ever have to worry about this anymore. What I learned from that was just increasing it that much just totally changed my perception of firewood and how much your price plays in how happy you can be at the end of the day, because you just made that much more money. I would have had to have sold uh 3 cords for the 2 that I would be selling them. That's how much that
Yep.
pay increase was. And then you think about, wow, all that extra labor I've saved, loading that trailer, all of that extra wood over a year for how much he was using. It really, really made sense. And that's where I just say raise your prices, and that's how I go for my dollar.
I'm the same way. When I started out, I was thinking of, you know, in my mind, the only thing was delivering third cords and full cords and dump trailers and pickup trucks. And it's like, how much wood would I need to be producing to do that? And I just said, oh my goodness, I am going to have to just skip out of the whole professional world and stick in as a hobbyist. And and focus on like you the smaller quantities, the bundles, just cater to a market of people who don't want a big load dumped in their yard and they just want a little bit for one night. That's all.
Yeah, and that's where I think firewood is not just firewood. Well, I mean, it could be, depending on the type of service that you're dealing with. But what is it about that delivery? For instance, that customer whose neighbor was looking at me kind of funny.
Yeah.
Here is a delivery service that showed up when he said he would be there, and I mean right on the minute. I was there. I showed up, and I have a nice uniform or a uniform shirt. I'm good in appearance. My truck did not leak oil on his driveway. My wood was clean. There was no mud. There was no mushrooms. There was no infestation. It was dry. It was seasoned. It was all hardwood. All of these things conspire to make that firewood's value more than just what the firewood is. The service is also involved too. Same thing in restaurants. I did a video recently on a restaurant delivery, and it isn't just the firewood, it's the service. These guys need you. When they drop the ball, they know that you have their back, because you can really hurt some of these places that just depend on firewood. And that is one of the foundations of your relationship with these guys. There is that level of trust. You will answer the phone when they call, or you will reply to their text messages immediately. And if you've ever worked in a restaurant, you know what it's like to be pulled in 1,000 different directions. And for a person to come in with firewood and say, "I've taken all of this off your list of worries," that relates into how much you can charge.
And yeah, and I think it reflects too on that, gives them the impression, and you are represented in their mind. Like they look at you and they know that the details and the attention you're paying to the service, the tardiness, all that stuff translates through everything. So like, they can be rest assured that the product you're delivering also is getting that attention. We're like, for example, like have you ever seen like these guys that power wash driveways?
Yeah.
So, you can show up and you can just quick turn on your pressure washer and wash a driveway in no time. But the guys that spend the extra time and attention to detail and make sure everything is, top notch, clean, those are the guys that, yes, they cost you more, but you see the end result of they put in the attention. It's the service. To your point, it's not just wash water on a driveway. It's the service that they provided and how they did it.
Yeah, that's the difference between being a craftsman or a craftswoman and a hack.
Yeah. Are you in it
I
to just
think,
make a quick buck, or are you actually in it to provide service?
yes, totally agree. And that was some of these videos that I've seen, some of the comments, not just on my videos, but on others. Um, you want to get into it to not debate, but to educate, because I think it's an opportunity for someone to see that firewood plays a much bigger role than just the physical product. But I don't know. Sometimes I think it's also a waste of time. 'Cause, whenever I reply to some of these guys, and it seems to always go downhill from there. So
Yeah, it escalates quickly. and and there's a lot of people who their way is the only way.
yeah, I don't know. I think maybe some people could accuse me of that too, but I'm not. I uh I'm one of these, I'm one of these people that take pride in minding one's own business, you know? And I mean, I show the way that I do it, but I think one thing I've been consistent about is that this is how I do it. This isn't the best way. This isn't the only way. I mean, I would argue that if you're a sole proprietor, I would highly recommend that you, uh, you know, give this approach a fair shot and not do firewood the way it's always done. But, to each their own. That may not be their goal. They just like doing it and they just want to sell it and get it gone. But for me, this is my livelihood, and I need to be able to be profitable, but I also need to keep growing this business too.
Right. And at the end of the day, like when all is said and done, what difference, or what does it really matter if you are selling your firewood for more than someone else? why should that other person, what is it really to them? If they, again, the point of, do you want to race to the bottom or do you want to aspire to the top? Like if they look
Yeah.
at you and they say, how are you getting that much for your firewood? It's not that you're the ripoff. It's like, why don't they try to then do what you're doing?
Yeah, or maybe it should be asked, why is this customer willing to spend that much for that little?
There is a good twist. Yeah,
You know?
why is it the
Yeah,
customer paying that much?
yeah. Why is it? Well, and I think that also implies, or, that means you got to start taking into consideration the totality of the transaction. Again, it is not just the wood.
Right.
If I, these restaurants that I deliver to, I'm telling you right now, if I were to ever get a stick of pine mixed into this load, they would kick me to the curb because, I was just delivering to this one barbecue pit. He had probably $1,000 worth of meat in that smoker when I was there. And some of these guys, they kind of have an idea of what the species is, but you know how it is. Sometimes a log could be deceptive. You don't know. It looked like it
Yep.
was cherry, and you threw it in. It was pine. They would kill me because they got to throw all this. They're going to throw all this meat away. And I just don't have pine. I've taken all kinds of steps to avoid anything even close to that. I put up a short the other day of my processor running a cherry log through it, and all of these people were commenting, "Wow, does great on pine. How would it do on hardwood?" And I say, "This isn't pine, man. I, I have never, I've never run a pine log through my processor. Never. I've never had a pine log come in on one of my log trucks. Never. So." And that is one of the things for my firewood that you're going to pay for. I don't make mistakes like that. When, like in Ohio, the law requires, if it is a species specific delivery, it has to be 90% that species, you know? And, I mean, I think it's reasonable to think, an occasional stick of something will get thrown in there, but not with me. When it's 100%, it's 100%. And I got multiple times to find that, I got a stick of maple in the cherry load. When we're making it, when we're stacking it, when we're loading it, when we're unloading it, and when we're stacking it at the customer's place, you eventually can tell if it's the wrong species. We don't make mistakes, but that's why you pay for my service.
I get heat for pine as well because they can't believe I'm putting pine in and selling my bundles for the same price as maple, ash, oak or whatever. But for me, when I buck up a log of pine, when I put it through the splitter, it all requires the same amount of work. It all takes the same amount of effort. It all, everything is the same. The pine doesn't split itself. It still needs to work.
Yeah, that was one thing I learned right away too about pine. When I'm looking to increase my price per stick of firewood, it takes the exact same amount of labor to make pine, and you're left with less than had it been a hardwood. So,
Yeah.
you know, but I just don't ever get pine. But that was when I had first started. There would be an occasional log come through, but that's where I thought, what the heck with this? I'm not going to do it. Because I remember too, one guy says, "Hey, I got a load of pine. Would you want it?" And I was smart enough at that time to say no. Not
Pine
that
is
I mean,
fine.
there's a lot of houses in this country that get heated with pine. All right. I think it's a fine firewood. I mean, it doesn't have the same BTU, but it burns great, burns just like the other stuff. Got to get it nice and seasoned. But for a producer, it's the same amount of labor.
Yep. It takes the
Yeah.
same amount no matter what.
Totally agree. Well, Dan, I just thought, I don't know, I see these YouTube videos and I keep saying I don't watch a lot of firewood videos, and I don't, but I still see themes that run through them. And there was one thing I picked up from my professional career was I was a multi-unit manager. So I would go around all these different stores. And there would always be some stores that are like the Taj Mahal, and then there was other stores where they were just train wrecks. It looked like Godzilla and Gamala threw it down in that store right before I got there. Even though it was the same company, they had the same process, the same controls. And it was always, to me, about the dominant discourse in that store. If the manager allowed people to start the belly aching and complaining, those were the stores that always looked like train wrecks. But the other stores that had a sales culture, teamwork, mutual support, you could see the difference.
Yep.
And I see that too with Firewood. Maybe it's that I want to not allow the people that just pound into others that they're a ripoff, or you're doing it wrong, you're touching the wood too much. I don't want that to be the dominant discourse. It doesn't mean I disagree with them. I mean, I do disagree with them if they're a sole proprietor, but I just want to push back and just reaffirm that there are different markets within the firewood industry.
Yep. Yep. And the one thing we might have to talk about this again at some point, but that dirty word, the dirtiest word in firewood,
What's that?
profit.
Yeah. Gosh.
That's always the driving theme. It seems like when I watch a few videos as well, and it's always like everyone's always trying to show how much money they make or how much they charge for this and justify that. And but again, it's always seems to be this race to the bottom. I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I read a lot into these comments, and I kind of, I when I get those kind of comments, I, why am I struggling to say this? I take pride in being a capitalist. Okay, I I am. I will scream it from the mountaintops. But then it's these guys too that denounce you for making profit.
Yeah.
Where I don't know, I think, okay, there's a difference between making profit and gouging people, taking advantage of the elderly, or raising, if you have a gas station, you raise your prices to $10 a gallon when there's an earthquake.
Yeah. Right. That's
We're not,
different.
yeah. Or even in firewood, you could gouge people if there's a power outage or something, and all of a sudden you have a 300% increase in your firewood. I'm not talking about gouging. We can all agree that that is ripping people off. But there's also different ways to rip people off in firewood. You don't sell them what you say you're going to sell them. You bring them
Yeah.
pine instead of hardwood. You bring them greenwood instead of season. You bring them a eighth of a cord instead of a sixth of a cord. You bring them less than a half of a cord for what they paid for. Those are all the ways that you rip people off. But for the price, especially when it is an agreed upon amount, the customer knows what they're getting and they get what they've paid for. Like, bundles. People say, well, that's a ripoff to charge that much. Well, you know what? Bundles are $1 billion industry. So who's getting, if
Right.
there's that
Somebody's
many
buying them.
people out there, yeah, if there's that many people out there that want to buy it, okay, that just means that you wouldn't pay that much for it, but that doesn't mean that someone else doesn't. You're probably not a accurate cross section of the country.
Right. Yep.
So I guess that is the essence of our discussion today, Dan.
Yes. Yeah. But
Evil profit.
yes, and like I said, we may have to revisit this one again because there's the other side of it from not just the firewood side, but like the YouTube and the hobbyist side of things. How how sad I am. I'm such a sad person for trying to make money in other ways off of what I do.
Oh,
We'll just leave
gosh.
that teaser right there.
You have gotten you've gotten ticked off lately.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Yeah. There are times where I get annoyed, but I don't know. You seem to, I don't know. Some people have gotten under your skin lately, Dan. Maybe you need to come to my wood yard and stack some wood. That's good therapy for you.
Well, I think it's kind of like back in the wrestling days. I would go for a while and kind of like I'd kind of get pushed as a baby face, and at some point the heel, I need to do a heel turn. The heel inside me is sometimes just needs to come out.
You're using some wrestling terms there, Dan. So
Yes.
I think everyone can figure out what a heel is and what a baby face is.
The bad guy. Yeah, the bad guy has got to come out sometimes. And but the thing is, like sometimes the bad guy has got to come out in order to just to address certain things, and then make some people realize that maybe I am not the bad guy. I don't know.
I always tell my kids, be nice to everyone. I say, even be nice to the people who aren't nice to you. You have no idea what's going on in people's lives.
Right.
But then again, I wasn't thinking of the internet troll.
and the fact that internet troll is a grown man. Like, I just don't understand it sometimes. Like, my goodness. Anyway, we better wrap this up before I completely go off the rails.
Yeah, I don't want to bring down the podcast here in one episode, Dan.
I don't have the beep button. I only have the little hobbyist music queued up, so I can't beep myself out and I start going off for you.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dan, how about let's get this music struck up before you say something you regret.
Yes, good idea.
All right. So Dan and I want to thank everyone for tuning in and listening to the Woodhounds podcast. We are the world's largest firewood podcast.
Yes.
Thank you.
The #1 firewood podcast on all major and even some minor podcasting platforms. Anyone, every platform. We're all over.
And we also have our own website, Dan.
That's right, thewoodhounds.com. And you can email us, thewoodhounds@gmail.com, if you'd like.
All right. Well, Dan, how about let's tell everyone to be
safe.
Don't be
a ripoff.
Yeah, I'm thinking of don't be hokey. And have
a great day.